About 2 years ago, my son Luke was 11 years old, and I'm sitting in the office at our house working on a leadership write-up. And Luke comes in and he says, "Dad, how do you know when someone is a good leader?" Now, it wasn't that I couldn't answer the question to a group of adults or a group of professionals, but how do you answer that to an 11-year-old? Fast forward over the last 2 years, I've been working on this. As Jack mentioned, we've been very blessed. Our business has grown, and we hire a lot of young people to come work for us at Pinnacle. And while I am removed from that business day to day because I'm busy serving in office, I still get a chance to coach people on leadership. And in fact, I have been studying it so much that I have been trying to synthesize all the books I have read and papers I have read and speeches I've seen, podcasts I've listened to. Literally over 100 books on different aspects of leadership and communication dot the shelves in my office. As I've been putting all this together, I've been working on answers for my children. Sarah, Luke, and Lance, they are 15, 13, and 11, or 10. And so what is the answer? How do you define, what do you know, how do you know what a good leader looks like? Sarah, Luke, Lance, good leaders do not make people do what is necessary. Good leaders inspire people to do what is possible. You know, as we think back to the 2018 election cycle and what a different look that had for us here in Texas. The fact that for the first time in modern history, we had a Democrat come within 3 points of winning a statewide office. And many of us up that night were asking ourselves, what happened? How did things shift? Is it possible that the demographics or that the policy positions have changed so dramatically that in 2 years, heck, 4 years from when I was elected, that our differential of 20 points would shrink to 3? Some quick numbers. 8.3 million people voted in the general election in 2018. 3.7 million of them had no voter history. No primary voter history. 3.7 million. And those 3.7 million people, at the top of the ticket, went 2/3 for Democrats. However, in the next race down, the gubernatorial race, they went closer to 45-55. So it tells us that these 3.7 million people without a primary history didn't go in and say, I am absolutely married to the Democrat ticket. What they did is went in and voted based on what? Today we're talking a lot about keeping Texas red. And to those of us in the room who have been Republicans longer than we can remember, that gets us fired up. We think, absolutely, we need to keep the people that we trust, the policies that we believe in, leading the state. But if you're talking to a group of people who have never been to a Republican event, they've never listened to a state representative or a state senator or a county commissioner talk about policies, to them, keeping Texas red is a foreign concept. But if you talk about leadership, now you're speaking their language. Now, what is it that really defines leadership? Because I submit to you that it will be leadership that enables us to keep Texas red, not because our main objective is to keep Texas red. Our main objective is to keep Texas strong. So if you say, all right, how do we do that? How do we lead? And what is it that we need to do to bring people to us? Good old-fashioned, hard-nosed leadership that's been around for hundreds of years will tell you this. It starts with understanding. What does it take to understand the people around me? Understanding the ability to, if I'm going to lead, to inspire people to do what's possible. Well, to do that, I have to understand those people. I have to know what makes them tick. In order to do that, we got to talk about 3 things. We're going to talk about politics, we're going to talk about communication, and we're going to talk about physiology. Now, I know with Dr. Bonin in the room, I'm getting in risky territory here, but I'm going to go for it anyway. First, let's talk about politics. What does the world of politics tell us about understanding? The world of politics has sent our next generation, my kids, Sarah, Luke, and Lance, arguably the most negative message in history about understanding. The world of politics has told us that in the quest for equality is also the quest for sameness. In other words, the world of politics has told us that if you don't look like me, then you can't understand me and you can't represent me. Today, identity politics drives virtually every election, especially Democrats. Oh, no, you can't vote for him. Why not? Because he's white and you're black. No, you can't vote for her. Why not? Because she's from this income bracket and you're not. You can't vote for him. Why not? Because he has never spoken a foreign language. You can't vote for him. You can't vote for her. He doesn't look like you. He's a man. You're a woman. He's tall. You're short. If you don't look like me, then you can't understand me. And nothing can be further from the truth when it comes to understanding. Those people who lead in business today know that understanding is not about the things on the surface. It is about the things in here. And that is where we will win elections. In 2004, I was back at the finest academic institution on the planet. And I was there to give a speech. Now, this was an engineering speech, and I was in a room full of engineers, and there was a group of young engineers there listening to a slate of speakers. And the speaker right before me was a college professor named Dr. Adams. And Dr. Adams was providing a speech on the engineering proof of the existence of God based on the origins of the universe. Now, I had gone to give a speech about reliability in the oil and gas industry, but I was fascinated by Dr. Adams' speech. Talked about all of the things that would be required to grow a universe and the way the universe existed today, and talked about how it evidenced the existence of God. Dr. Adams finished giving his speech that I found fascinating. And just as he was finishing his speech, he opened the floor for questions. And a young woman sitting in the front row raised her hand. I couldn't see her, but I saw her hand go up. Dr. Adams says yes. And the woman asks, Dr. Adams, do you believe that women and men are equal? And he kind of quickly responded somewhat casually, no. Gasps from the room. Across the board, people were freaking out. And Dr. Adams, realizing that he had made a political faux pas, kind of smiles calmly. And he gives an answer that goes something like this. He says, women are 4 times more likely to anticipate or understand someone's emotional state just by looking at them. Men are 4 inches taller, 30 pounds heavier. They lift more weight and they can run faster. Women can tolerate pain statistically 30% longer than men can. Men can picture geometric shapes, predict angles on horizons, and paths of projectiles better than women can. Women excel in virtually every verbal category we have, from the written word to reading comprehension. Men are twice as likely to become alcoholics. Women are twice as likely to experience depression or post-traumatic stress syndrome. And boys are 10 times more likely to be diagnosed with ADD or dyslexia, and 4 to 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with autism. He says, does that sound equal to you? In that little gem is some wisdom. The quest for equality is not the quest for sameness. As we go into this election cycle and we say there are 3.6 million people that will show up at these polls, what we have to do is not talk about the things that we love to talk about. We have to talk about the things that they want to talk about. And what's interesting is those things are so similar to the things that we believe that it would scare you. When you talk about things like the next generation having better opportunities than we did, when you talk about equality, talking about things like equal opportunity, not necessarily looking and acting the same. And don't get me wrong, politicians and the press love to use some sort of statistical anomaly to scare us with words like inequality. Oh, we've got income inequality. And someone would say, what does that mean? Income inequality. That we don't all make the same amount of money? Should we? And everyone says, well, no. No. What we mean is income inequality. When you have the exact same woman and exact same man, then they don't make the same amount of money. Gallup released a book this year based on interviews with 300 chief HR operating officers at the largest companies in the world and tens of millions of interviews, and determined that when you take a woman and a man in the same role, same experience, same background, their pay is virtually identical. There is a statistic out there that tell you 83% that women make 83% of what men make. If you eliminate the women who have chosen to stay at home with the kids at some point of their career, income levels are virtually identical. So the world of the press today and the world of politicians is sending a message, apparently, that women, it's no longer acceptable for you to choose to stay home with your kids, because that creates income inequality. However, if you poll women who have kids under the age of 18, 54% would prefer a homemaker role. So we are losing the battle, not because our ideas are wrong, but because of how we're communicating. So let's talk about communication real quickly. Some interesting things about communication. I got a guy named Michael Alasso, who I believe is the finest communication coach in the world. Michael Alasso charges $10,000 a day to coach leadership teams, coach corporations. And I've been blessed to be in a group with Michael Alasso. And Michael talks about the fact that all of us out there speak 3 different languages, or people in the room speak 3 different languages. Some of us communicate head, some of us communicate heart, some of us communicate gut. What does that mean? Head communicators are people that like to talk numbers and statistics, people that like to analyze the logic and explain the policy details. People who communicate with their heart are people that talk stories about their kids and how scared I was the time that my daughter got lost on an elevator. People who communicate with their gut talk about how in this next election we were going to kick ass and you either get on my team or get out of the room. Head, heart, and gut. Now, if you think, by the way, that sounds weird. I'm not sure about that, Ryan. Think about the last presidential primary in the Republican side. 17 candidates were running for the Republican nomination. Do you remember that there was 15 of them were head communicators, 1 heart communicator, and 1 gut communicator? Do you remember who the heart communicator was? Ben Carson. Ben Carson would get up there and he would tell stories about growing up, and some people would say, I'm not sure what he said, but I sure did like that guy. Of course, the other 15 basically slogged out because they were speaking 1 language, 15 head talkers. And eventually got down to Ted Cruz, who was the last head talker left in the race. It got very close to Ted and Ben Carson and, of course, the gut talker, Donald Trump. And what do people like about that? People who aren't even gut talkers would say, man, we like that guy. Why? Because he tells it like it is. However, if you understand the differences between women and men, you know that a larger percentage of women are heart talkers than head and gut talkers. And why is that? Let's talk a little physiology. In 2014, a study was done at the University of Pennsylvania. They studied 1,000 people, which is an abnormally large sample set for this kind of study. They looked at functional MRIs, which basically is an analysis that shows how pieces of the brain light up when you're doing things. Dr. Bonnet, don't correct me. And what they found was that doing different exercises, a long-held theory came true. That in fact, the connections between the different lobes of the brain are somewhere between 4 and 8 times more active in women than men. It's proof women are superior. Wait a minute. We also found that within the lobes of the brain, the connections are faster or more frequent in men's brains. Aha! Men are more superior. No. Once again, equality is not sameness. What does it mean when you've got higher connection levels in the white space between the lobes of your brain? It means that you can process different types of issues at the same time. Imagine you had a problem that was logical, emotional, and aesthetic all at the same time. A guy like me, my mind is blown. I don't know what to do with that. But my wife says, sure, I can process all those at the same time because I've got all the connections. If I say I've got a very focused problem, a very logical problem, and there's a lot of distraction in the world, I need to eliminate all the distractions and solve that problem right now, Jennifer goes, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with all that stuff. I go, I'm going to solve that problem. Equality, not sameness. The mission in front of us today is not the same political mission we've had for the last 20 years. Today it is to understand the people around us. So I have two things to ask you to do. One, it is fun to sit in the room like this and celebrate and bid money and say, yes, we are going to go out and we are going to keep Texas red. And as Dr. Bonner said, I'm going to be the top state official on the ballot. I'm excited for the messages we're going to carry to attract the next generation of people to the things that we believe. However, when we get outside of this room, we got to listen. We got to listen to the way people talk. We got to listen to the things that they're concerned about, because I'll wager that 70% of the people in this state believe the same things that we do. But they don't want to talk about Republican politics. They want to talk about the things that we believe. And when we do that, we win elections. Handedly. When Ronald Reagan ran for his second term in office, do you know that Ronald Reagan won every single state in the Union except one? Won 60% of the popular vote. Do we believe that somehow in the last 35 years, 40 years, that the country's politics have shifted so dramatically? I don't think so. There's a reason that we talk about that we have Lincoln Reagan dinners in our party. Reagan was so good at communicating in head, in heart, and in gut all at the same time. He'd move back and forth between them. And people would say about Reagan, man, when he talked about that shining city on the hill, we want what that guy's talking about. Now is our time in Texas to do the same thing. To be leaders. To communicate with people in the way they want to be communicated with. And as we share our vision, share our values, do it in a way that resonates with what people believe. If we do that, then I believe this election cycle will not only reverse what happened last time, but it'll even set us back on a track like it was when I was elected in 2014. When Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick and I, all of us up and down the ballot, won by 20 points. And I'm going to say this. It's not because we were just talking about being Republican. We weren't angry. We were talking about a vision for the future and a vision that everybody, or a large portion of people in this state, bought into. That's leadership. And that is inspiring a group of people to do what's possible.